very kindly going to talk to us today about the Guildford Community Hub.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, so I am a member of XR, but this is not specifically Extinction Rebellion project. It is more of a community project, and there's if you guys are looking to do this has come about via a network of people called Space Generators, who have been involved in doing some of this before. And it's some people involved have been doing this for about 30 years, and it started off really as sort of squatting buildings and turning them into community centres, obviously big disused buildings, empty buildings, and now but basically we found sort of a legal way to do it, which has obviously really opened it up to a lot more people who would want to get involved in community centres, and also to other towns. With Guildford, I don't think you get many people coming through the door if you were squatting somewhere and you were trying to attract people through the door. So yeah, it's really sort of changed the game in how much of the community you can actually get involved. And actually, what's really handy from what you were just saying there, Carrie, the fact that you're a charity, that's actually our biggest stumbling block at the moment, because it takes 3 to 4 months to get a charity set up. So potentially you're in a much better starting place than we were when we started going a couple of months ago. So this is happening in various parts of the UK at the moment, and up in Scotland, a couple of groups up there have got looking at doing a similar thing, and in Surrey we've got not just Guildford looking, but Staines have been offered a building now. Farnham's looking at doing something, and I think Elmbridge are looking at doing something as well. So I'll run you through I made these slides, but for the purposes of being able to use these to approach other groups, I've made a generic version as well, which now the network is using to approach other groups. So if you want these when you start approaching other people, then you can just have the blank copy of the slides, and then you can just fill it in to suit what you're doing basically, and what groups you've got involved. So I'll start sharing. This will probably last about 10 minutes. The start bit, this is basically just what I use to approach people of all from all different groups. So the start bit is probably going to be stuff you're quite familiar with, because it's sort of framing the reason that we needed climate emergency centres and need to be looking for solutions to stuff and building resilience and adaptation. And then some of it is quite Guildford specific. But obviously for you guys, you'll be able to change that as you go. So I'll just start sharing my screen now so you can see the slides. Can you see that? Oops. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay. So, as you guys probably all know, the United Nations, the IPCC report, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, came out in October 2018. And I think a lot of people were pretty concerned about climate change before. I was pretty environmentally conscious, really worried about climate change, but that really sort of ratcheted up the pressure of that report, where modelling was shown that by 2030 we'll pass the tipping points at which climate breakdown becomes irreversible. And actually, in light of studies over the last couple of months during lockdown, things have escalated even further. You probably saw University of Manchester and Kevin Anderson up there release a report saying that we are potentially looking at 5 degrees warming now above pre-industrial levels. And it's been stated a couple of times in a couple of studies in the last few months that it looks like we may have already passed 9 of these tipping points. Obviously, you don't see the effects of passing them straight away, but it's pretty harrowing stuff. We don't really know how the planet will respond, and when we pass one, even if we've passed one, we don't know how that will affect others and whether it will trigger others. So you can see some of these tipping points here. And you guys probably know all about feedback loops, positive feedback loops, and the fact that, climate breakdown isn't just a linear problem. As soon as you pass one of these tipping points, the problem starts escalating because of these feedback loops, making it worse and worse. And methane, you guys again probably know this, but methane is the best example, I think, of this. There's millions of tons of methane stored in permafrost, and the more the planet warms, permafrost melts, it releases methane, and methane is between 20 to 30 times more powerful at warming the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. So it melts permafrost even quicker, meaning more methane is released, and so on. So that is the seriousness of the situation that we face. And despite this, and despite, this isn't a secret, despite this being very common knowledge, of the 197 countries who committed to the Paris Accord a few years ago, only 17 are currently meeting their pledges to keep us within 1.5 degrees warming as a best case scenario, an absolute limit of 2 degrees. We aren't one of them. You'll often hear people say, why don't you go protest in China or India? But India actually is keeping to the 2 degrees warming at the moment. And as you know, China makes all of the stuff that we consume. So these aren't really fair arguments. And if you look at this chart, you can see only 2 countries are Paris compliant, and that's Morocco and Gambia. And currently nobody is a role model. So there's nobody that's taken policy pledges to actually start getting us below 1.5. And it actually looks like 1.5 is unachievable now. That was part of the studies that have come out during lockdown. So as I stated at the top, it's really important that we start thinking about adaptation and resilience, because if we have passed these tipping points, especially, things are about to get a lot worse. And even at 1.1 at the moment, 1.1 above pre-industrial levels, we can already see, really increasing frequency and intensity in extreme weather events. So it's not just about mitigation anymore. There's a good chance that, we're going to go above 2 degrees. Currently, we're on target for 4 degrees, but that doesn't mean all is lost. And ultimately, every half a degree that we save does mean millions of lives potentially saved as well. So the global governments aren't really doing anything to deal with this. And local councils, I don't know what your guys' council is like, but Guildford is actually pretty good. Last May, we sort of flipped the council, and it's actually a lot more balanced now, and they really are trying pretty hard on the climate front. And it looks like we probably managed to convince them to have a citizens' assembly as well to build a climate action plan, a community climate action plan, like was done in Camden. They held a citizens' assembly and they built a 17-point climate action plan out of it. So that's what we're trying to look to in Guildford as well. So some councils are trying, some less so, but ultimately their funding comes from either Surrey County Council, in your case, I guess West Sussex, or from the government, and they are pretty largely hamstrung by whoever's controlling the council or the government. And as an example, for our council, Guildford Borough Council, through their direct control, can only really deal with about 1% of borough emissions. So that's everything that they would have direct control over. And then when you factor in transport, that then takes it up to the county council level. That includes about another 30%. So most towns probably have between about 50 to 60% of emissions, which are completely beyond the operation of either council, either borough or county. And so therefore they really need to be tackled within the community through driving behavioural change and changing consumption patterns, which is obviously really difficult because a lot of people don't really want to change. We got really used to the comfort of a consumer lifestyle. But really right now we're at the point where it's either change and do something about it, or we're kind of screwed really. So we need that massive community buy-in, and this sort of project offers some sort of hope for that. So if your town or borough, what have you, has declared a climate emergency, then the next logical step after that is to try and scale things up by getting community buy-in, because as I say, the councils can't do it all themselves. And a lot of communities sort of wait for the council to do stuff as well. So part of this is to show communities that, you don't have to wait for councils to start taking action. You can start doing a lot of it yourself and potentially shoulder a lot of the work that the council would otherwise do, to leave them free to focus on, the harder policy stuff around climate. So this is looking to drag the whole community in together, businesses, the council, residents, get everybody together and try and figure out a way forward. And again, it's not just about mitigation anymore. It's really about building your town's resilience in light of escalating global crises. So the way that we're sort of laying this out in Guildford, we've divided this up into 4 separate sections. And what it's supposed to do is to provide an actual physical hub where we can draw the community in, the wider community, because if it's just everyone in green groups, and you're just, you're preaching to the choir already. So this needs to be something that is appealing enough to lots of people in town and across all parts of the political spectrum, that they will come in for one reason and potentially discover quite a lot of other stuff that's going on there and potentially start getting engaged. And we're not, I mean, for me, the climate crisis isn't a standalone factor. I don't personally think you can tackle climate breakdown by just looking at climate breakdown and ecological destruction. Ultimately, it's just a different side of the same dice, all linked with, food poverty, homelessness, racial, gender, inequality, ageism, ableism. All of these things are pretty much underpinned by the current economic model we use, which effectively uses growth as the only metric of success and puts corporate profit above all of these factors. Child poverty, homelessness, all of those are acceptable collateral for GDP growth or what have you. And when it comes to things like climate breakdown, ecological destruction and inequality, those are actually encouraged by the system, because obviously it keeps the status quo ticking in a manner that wealth keeps funneling upwards because of the setup of the system. So what we're looking to do here is to build something attractive enough that we draw in a lot of the community to improve education and engagement around climate and around these other issues, and help with some understanding in the driving factors of all of these issues. But also, as I say, because it is about resilience and adaptation, we're looking to platform solutions to some of these things and to build our resilience through employing some of these, but especially by trying to sidestep the destructive global economic system and think about doing things a lot more locally. So you can see the things listed here, and some of these might be, like zero waste shops, and we're looking at trying to do a zero transport emissions shop. So we source a load of stuff locally and then sell it in the shop, which will be in a high street location, so that people can actually do a big part of their shop knowing pretty much where their food came from and that it was all made within 10 miles and picked up in an electric van or what have you. So these are just a couple of examples. Obviously, your imagination really is the limit of what people can do with this, and it depends what groups you're looking to get involved. But yeah, so there's two sides to this as we see it. Education and engagement is one, and then offering solutions of how we can get out of this consumerist lifestyle, how we can reconnect with nature, because again, the second issue for me with second driving factor of climate breakdown is our complete loss of connection to nature. We've totally forgotten that we depend on ecosystems to survive, and think we can tame them and control them and use them for our own good. So helping people to make that connection again, and try and figure out ways that we can reverse some of this trend. So this isn't, as I said at the start, this isn't my idea or Guildford's idea. It's been going for a while, and it's been used lots of different times. The Hive in Dalston used the same financial model, which I'm going to come on to in a second, and they were open for 2.5 years. They held about 1,000 community events in that 2.5 years. So that really sort of demonstrates how many people you can get through the door, and that if you've got a permanent setup of what people are doing in your town or borough, it really starts involving a lot more people that would never see any of this without going looking for it. And then through Space Generators as well, one of the other groups that we've got doing this, they're in the process of setting up in an old home base in Ilford. I think it's Redbridge. It's really good that it's a home base, because obviously sort of permaculture and community farming is a big part of where we want to go with this. And for these guys in Ilford, they've already got all the irrigation systems set up because it was an old home base. So it's massive. It's probably more than a lot of people could deal with on their first go, because it's got quite a few experienced people dealing with it. It's it's perfect for that. So to explain briefly about the financials, and this will probably bring up some questions later, what you would do in your example, you guys are already a charity, so you probably know that if you were going to be looking at getting a premises somewhere, you're entitled to discretionary business rates. So most councils operate on a mandatory a mandatory business rate discount, which is 80%, and then most of them have an additional 20% discretionary discount if you can fulfill one of a few criteria to show that you're doing good for the community effectively. And realistically, the CEC model fulfills, at least for Guildford, fulfills all 5 of the criteria. So it's not difficult to get the 100%. So you're offered these discretionary business rates, and what you do is you negotiate a meanwhile lease with the owner of a vacant building. So there's a lot of empty buildings, obviously, at the moment. COVID has led to a lot of closures, and I don't know what it's like down where you guys all are, but our high street is rapidly becoming pretty empty. So we've got a lot of buildings there. While those buildings are empty, the owner still has to pay business rates. So as an example, I looked up the old Argos in Guildford, and they're paying £225,000 a year just to have an empty building there. So what you do is you negotiate a meanwhile lease with the owner, and then you pass on the discretionary business rate savings. So that potentially allows the owner of the building to save up to 100% business rates. And you sign a contract with them in the meanwhile lease saying, look, you'll transfer this 100% saving over to them and you won't pay rent. And what you do is you negotiate a rate that they pay you back. So they give you sort of like a rebate on that 100%. So say you arrange 15 to 20%, they would then pay that back in to help you with your setup costs, your maintenance, any staffing needs, etc. So to use an example, because I know that's not that clear to run through it straight away, if a building owner was paying 150,000 a year in business rates, and as a charity you got the mandatory 80% discount, the owner of the building would still pay that outstanding 20%, so 30 grand would go to the council. They'd be left with 120 grand, and let's say you managed to negotiate 20%, they would then pay you back 24,000 for startup funding, and they would keep 96,000. So they're then suddenly not paying, 96,000, which they get to keep. So effectively, that's profit for them. You're getting startup funding. So everyone's a winner, really, at the end of the day. The benefits for the building owner, obviously, is the money is the main thing. They save potentially tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds on a big building. They've got someone living in there. Potentially there's quite often the models are used where they have a living caretaker, but also there's people there all the time. So it protects against theft and vandalism. And especially it helps give back to your community. So potentially you can give the building owner a pretty good name, whoever it is within the community. Benefits for the groups involved, so you guys, and it looks like you've already got a pretty good collection of groups going there, is that you have an area where you can platform what you're doing the whole time. You can share resources and skills, so you all potentially grow a lot quicker. It brings you all together effectively under an umbrella, which I know as a member of XR, I think is always quite difficult. It's easier for other groups, but a lot of people won't associate with XR no matter what you do. And so I think that will always be a problem, to be honest. So this potentially gives a good way of bringing all green groups together. And typically people in XR are pretty active and pretty busy with trying to do stuff. So I feel like a lot of people will potentially be crossover members between CECs and XR. So it's a good way to bring people together in ways that you can all collaborate effectively under an umbrella. It lets you generate income. So obviously you get the startup funding from the business rates, but also you'll be looking to hold events. We're going to have a cafe, and as I mentioned, the two linked shops, the zero waste shop and the zero transport emission shop. And what we're looking to do with those is to draw in two local businesses. So we're looking to get a vegan cafe that already exists and a plastic free shop which already exists. So we're platforming local businesses, don't want to be taking business away from them, so we're trying to get them involved in some capacity. So there's lots of different ways that you can generate income, but potentially it will help you fund projects and build the CEC up. And what we're doing is we're gonna pay for what we need, what we establish as our essentials within the CEC, and then we're going to put everything into a pot, and that will then be used for community projects, either for schools or for
whoever wants to do something around an environmental or social cause. You get improved access to the community and, again, to all parts of the political spectrum that you wouldn't necessarily have got. If you put talks on, you're likely to get people who wouldn't come to one of your normal green meetings or what have you. So you can sort of entice people in this way. And then hopefully while they're there, they'll learn a little bit of extra stuff and maybe start getting involved in some aspects. And importantly, it helps you meet the local community needs, and it builds up your community's resilience and your support networks in case of future crisis. One thing, as I was approaching a volunteer network for this, one thing I hadn't really thought of, but he was telling me that when COVID hit, Guildford's entire volunteer network pretty much went down, because it's obviously mostly made up of retired people. And when the pandemic hit, obviously all those people had to pretty much go into hibernation. So we were left with virtually no volunteers to help people, and all the mutual aid groups sprung up. And I think that was a really encouraging thing to see, because I think it does show that people are prepared to do stuff for the community in times of crisis. And that ultimately they just need that pathway to be able to do it. So I think this offers something potentially like that pathway to get people involved. It's open to anybody. Ours is open to anybody. These are some of the groups we've got involved so far. So I think we've probably got about 15 different groups involved now. We've got the Uni of Surrey in Guildford, which has some of you know Tim Jackson. He works up at Cusp there. So we've got one of Cusp involved. We've got from the uni, the air pollution department, the community focus side of it, Guildford Living Lab. They are going to be designing us a living wall for the front of the building. So we'll be using that to showcase the benefits of using roadside vegetation for air pollution, to reduce air pollution, but also to increase biodiversity within the town centre. And then obviously that's just a nice thing to try and attract people. We don't have any living walls here, so hopefully it'll be something that catches people's eye. So all of these groups, which I'm sure you've got similar of down your way, are people you can get involved. So that is the last slide. I'm going to stop screen sharing. Yeah, and open up to any questions.
Thank you so much, Ben. That was really, really brilliant. Great. Hopefully some of us can follow suit. If people have got questions, and there are quite a few of us, but as long as we keep our questions reasonably succinct, maybe pop your hand up if you've got a question, and take your mic off and ask away. I wanted to ask Ben, the people involved in this, like you're obviously, pulling this whole thing together. Is this going to be your job, or are you, lots of you, working in full-time jobs, and this is just your passion that you're finding time to do?
Yeah, I'm not going to take a wage from it personally. I'll still volunteer. So the way we see this working is we're going to have either one full-time employee, or two part-time employees to start with, and then we'll have a database of volunteers and rotate them through schedules, like a charity shop would, I suppose, essentially. So what we're doing, as I said, involving the local businesses, we'll obviously have someone involved from the cafe, so that they'll be there the whole time, and someone from the shop will be there the whole time, and then we would like to have someone there that's manning the centre to speak to people, and then when there's events, there'll be obviously more people there to deal with a big influx. But we're trying to make this an attractive place for people to actually come to for a coffee or for vegan food or what have you, vegetarian food, and as they're just walking past, they might think, oh, what's that? I'll go in and have a look in there. So yeah, I won't be taking a wage from it, but I think it does potentially, with the funding, you do potentially need to be paying someone to get in there, really.
And how long have you been working on it, and where is it at with launch?
So we've been going probably about 2 months, I suppose. As I said, what's holding us up is that it takes so long to register as a charity. It's between 3 and 4 months to register as a charity. So we're quite lucky because we've got a really well-established, they've been going about 25 years, Guildford Environmental Forum. And they're involved. They are letting us use their bank account. So that's put us off to a pretty good start. it is possible to use, I think, I can check this for you, if you wanted to do something, you found a building immediately, it probably doesn't apply for you, because you've already set up as a charity. But for anybody else, I heard a couple of people from Lewis were here. I think it's okay to use the Space Generators charity to set up if you found a building immediately, and then you'd be able to transfer over at a later date. So I think that is an option if people were looking to go quick. We're trying to do it independently. We've also got quite a few councillors involved. So I've got one councillor involved in a personal capacity, and then another few. So I met with the people who hold the climate, the communities, and the environment portfolios, 3 of them. Because ultimately we can get a lot of their projects involved, like the repair cafe. I saw you've got the repair cafe. That's actually a council project here. So there's a lot of things that we could potentially draw in. Library of Things is another. So they're helping. They've discussed whether we can go in one of their council buildings. I'm reluctant to do that because right now they're doing a pretty good job. But if, let's say, the council flipped again in a couple of years and they didn't like what we were doing and we were in one of their buildings and they started saying, you can't do this, I don't want to be in that situation. So I'm unless the perfect building comes up through the council, I would rather remain independent and have their involvement, but without their control, if you see what I mean. And therefore, I've explained that to their point person. I think it's a fairly understandable issue. So.
So can people at the moment, you say you've been going 2 months, it's actually been in operation open to the public for 2 months?
No, sorry. So until you actually set up as a charity, you can't get you can't confirm that you've got the business rates discount, which then makes you struggle with getting the building. So what we're looking at potentially is to try and get something from the council, which like an agreement in principle, effectively a bit like a mortgage, I suppose, where they will say, once they're set up as a charity, this is what will happen. So that if we can find the building, like the ideal building that we want, that we'll then be able to approach them. So, but obviously it's the council and they're really busy, especially with COVID. So it's taken them a while. They're also, every council has I forget what they call it now, but a list of all the empty buildings in town. So that's a really good first place to start. You can just cycle around and look for the boards, but it's a good place to start. If you've got a friendly couple of councillors, it's a good place to start with finding empty buildings.
Right. Mark.
Questions on chat. Yeah, Mark, do you want to start? And then, yeah, maybe.
I was just going to ask, do you only get the startup funding, the sort of kickback on the startup funding in year 1, or might that happen every year, do you think?
Yeah, well, my plan is to negotiate it every year. So obviously a lot of the first year will go on setting up the building as we want it, but then potentially the second year, let's say you got 20 grand, the second year you would then get that to either scale up what you're doing or to get another employee. So that's the intention, is that because they're saving that money every year, so there's no reason that they shouldn't be paying back in effectively.
Heidi, do you want to ask your question? Because or comments.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fabulous. So basically I work with the co-op, and we do a lot based with community work as well, which is why I wanted to jump on today. There's a lot that we can do to actually help and support. So I'm the contact for all the Horsham stores, so I can, there's like manager funds that you can access each month. You can join and sign up to be like a charity or cause for a whole year, things like that. There's loads and loads that we can do, and there's obviously bits and pieces that we can do as well to help and support, not financially as well, things like sharing information in different ways, putting things up in store even in that local area. Ben, also I would highly recommend contacting your local Guildford stores. I
have done, actually. Chris. Yeah, I forget what his surname is, but I missed it. So you had a deadline for funding, didn't you, a couple of weeks ago?
Yes.
And I missed the deadline because we're not the registered charity, so there was nothing to do about it.
But when you do get that, you can get that manager fund. You will be able to get access to that as well.
Cool. Yeah, I figured what I would do is, as soon as we've got the charity, I would just approach him again. He seemed like he really liked the idea, the whole premise of the project. So I figured I would just try and apply out of the deadline as well. It can't hurt, can it?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, this is the thing. Like, we've got that yearly thing, which is obviously what you attempted to apply for just short a while ago. And that is an incredible opportunity, but it happens every year. So if you've missed it this year, you can do it next year really, really easily. And, you know, if you build a relationship with Chris, then obviously when you do apply, because it's actually down to the stores to choose their 3 causes. So if you build a relationship with them, and you can, you know, you can go into store, you can go into store and actually have like tables out there, and you can like be there giving out information and things like that. It's, you know, the co-op stores are so like, you know, they're just so community based. It's amazing. And they're always wanting to get involved in whatever else is going on, you know. So definitely for everyone here, the co-op stores are a really good avenue, because you've got people coming in all the time. You know, you get in front of a different audience that way as well, don't you? And I know that you said you need to get in front of different audiences. Definitely. So yeah,
thanks. I'll start buttering him up then for next year.
100%. Yeah, do it now. Say, I need to get in there. Okay, yeah, fab. I'll go back on mute so someone else can have a go. Thank you. Thanks.
So Heidi, can I actually ask, I did actually, the Partridge Green co-op store did put out a message saying that they were looking for a local charity, a cause really, and I did actually approach them, and I did have a meeting with the manager over there, but it sort of, it didn't seem a very formal sort of system, and yeah, I followed it up and nothing happened. So are people supposed to go to a regional person like you? Is that what?
Well, I mean, it's our job as a member pioneer to like bridge the gap between the store and the community. Okay. That is our gap with the interface, basically. What I can do is, are you local to Partridge Green store?
Well, most of our outreach for Sussex Green Living, the Horsham Repair Cafe, the Horsham Climate Cafe, which all fall under Sussex Green Living, are in Horsham District. Okay. So we do, we work with a lot of the parishes, a lot of the surrounding villages. I actually work with schools in West Sussex and offer free climate education. That's what I was actually talking to Partridge Green store about. Okay. So maybe we can hook up and have a more in-depth conversation rather than boring everyone else.
Yeah, I think honestly, Carrie, I think that would be amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Do that. Thanks, you've got my email, so drop me an email.
How did you hear about this today?
Joe, I popped on, and I think I was just randomly searching through Google, and I saw it, and I was like, oh, that would be amazing.
Great. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Right, I'll let someone else have a go. Thanks, Carrie. See you later.
Thanks, Ben.
I just randomly discovered that co-op thing on Twitter. So I would say, just keep an eye on, type in the name of your town on Twitter, and it's a bit time consuming, but if you just scroll through everything, I found at least 2 local philanthropy Twitter pages on there, and that's how I came across co-op as well. So it's well worth, I know most people don't really like social media that much, but it's well worth having a little scroll.
What did you scroll for then? Guildford and funding or grants, or?
I just type in Guildford quite frequently because I run a XR account in Guildford. I just quite frequently type it in to just see what's going on, because again, like obviously this is a big part of getting involved in the community. Part of the reason that I sort of got involved with this is that obviously being an XR member, it's a constant battle of being framed by the media as protesters versus public, and obviously that is not the true battle here at all. The true battle is everybody against the 1% that's polluting everything, and the governments that are just complicit in all of this destruction. And so I personally feel that I think there's quite a lot of arrogance within people thinking, oh, we're messaging around this. It doesn't matter what the media say because this is our message. That's never ever going to shout louder than the billionaire media. Obviously, that's crazy thinking that. For me, the only way to flip that narrative is to get out into your community, and every time they read something in the paper, more and more people read it and think, actually, I know some of those people, and that isn't at all my experience with them. That for me is the only way that's possible. And so that's how I started trying to get involved with community stuff a lot more, probably about 8-9 months ago. and why I think this is such a great idea, because it really opens up, I think, the climate movement to a lot more people. It means you don't have to necessarily go out on the streets. You don't have to join marches or whatever. You can get involved more in the behind the scenes stuff, I think. So obviously I would still encourage everybody to get out on the streets, definitely. But I think for people who can't, for whatever reason, this is a really good option.
There's some questions from Gemma around insurance and the committee and the constitution that might be quite interesting. Have you found it easy to get insurance? Gemma, do you want to actually just put your voice to those?
Pretty much my question was, have you found it easy to get insurance?
So far, the only insurance needed, as far as I can tell, but obviously this may change, has been public liability, which, yeah, isn't a problem. Setting up is a bit more tricky. So the ideal way to do this is to set up as a CIC, which is a community interest company, which is effectively I think it was, I'm not an expert in this, but I think it was sort of like it replaced what was being a charity and a company at the same time, merged them together.
Yeah, Ben, can I just, I'll just cut in very, very briefly. Woods for Learning, we're a CIC. So if anybody wants additional information, they can get in contact with me. So we've been a CIC for 6 years now.
Cool.
And we're actually a CIO, which is a new type of charitable organisation that's really somewhere between a CIC and a charity.
Yeah. So the issue for us was that some groups have set up as CICs and not had a problem with the business rates. Guildford Council doesn't give the mandatory 80% discount to CICs. They'll only give it to CIOs. So that was basically our initial stumbling block when we found a building. Like, right, let's go ahead with this. That's what has basically put a bit of a spanner in the works for us and slowed us down a bit. So the councillors are looking at whether there's anything they can do about that to help us start moving quicker. But I would say that's a really important first step to figure out if you're looking to do this in your town. Immediately, there's a business rates email that you'll find on your council's website. Email them and ask them who they give the 80% mandatory discount to, because yeah, that was a bit of a put the brakes on a little bit, unfortunately.
Just to add to the insurance question, in Seaford we're thinking of starting with pop-up events because we haven't got the people to run a building for them at the moment. So if anyone knows about insurance for pop-up events and how we can go about that.
I can tell you how to get I can tell you how to get a 1 day public liability, if that helps. I think it's like £30 or something.
Okay.
I'll pop it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Or actually, no, what I'll do is I'll email it to Carrie, and then Carrie can put it in an email of a summary or something.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
What we do actually after each of these presentations and meetings is usually a very brief blog. And then if we filmed it, we embed the presentation and maybe the PowerPoint presentation so people can look at that. And if there's any additional information that people have asked for in the chat, we can share that in the chat as well. So, yeah. Has anyone else got questions, comments, contributions? Yeah. Well, lots of food for thought, for sure. There's a lot of chat going on about office staples, office outlet. I mean, at the moment, we're actually securing a shop window for the Youth Eco Forum to do an environmental display to promote the Keep Rookwood Green Bio Blitz, to promote a South Downs National Park Eco Art competition that we're running, and yeah, eco fashion. So yeah, I'm getting that shop window, that shop through Crickmaze. So Gary Mortimer Cook put me in touch with Crickmaze. So if we want to find out about office outlet or staples, yeah, Gary Mortimer Cook's probably the person to speak to. But...
Jill, did you want to? You were waving your finger.
Oh, well, I thought Mark's question was really interesting. What is going to be the most difficult thing for Ben?
That's a good question. So getting people involved, I found, was quite easy. there's a lot of enthusiasm for it, and part of, to link in originally as well, what you said at the start, Carrie, with getting people involved. I don't know how you guys find it, but this is definitely a problem within XR a lot, is that you have it doesn't matter how big your group is always a core of people that do almost all the work. And so for Guildford, our meetings will be between 60 and 70 people, but there's probably 10 to 15 people that do most stuff. But obviously, as soon as you start reaching out to other groups, you're effectively getting all the core of people who do loads of stuff. So we've actually ended up with not enough stuff to give people to do at the moment, and there's so many people itching to join in that it's really helped move things along quite quickly. It's really refreshing to be involved where everybody is like itching to do something. I think probably finding a building that every group involved, because I think we've probably got about 15 groups involved now, and obviously we're saying you can use the space how you want within reason and fairness, obviously, but a lot of the requirements in the building, like we would really like to have vertical farming going in there, and some sort of like community farming aspect. Tying all of that into a building that does all of that is going to be quite tricky, I think. And then I suppose, yeah, volunteering maybe might be quite tricky. Getting enough people to keep it open. I think we'd like to keep it open from about 8 till probably 10 or 11 at night when we've got events going on. So I think, yeah, having enough people that aren't getting paid to do that. But hopefully that will solve itself as more people start getting involved from the wider community. But I've never run one of these before, Mark, so I'm not really sure what the major stumbling blocks are. I'm learning as I go as well, so I'll keep you posted.
Which are the longest established centres?
Well, in this new setup, the Ilford one is basically pretty much kitted out now. I'm not really sure what's happened before. So the Hive shut down, I think, in 2018. And that had been going for 2.5 years. I think that was one of the first to use the sort of legal business rates model. Yeah. Can I just jump in? Gemma's had her finger up for ages.
Oh, Gemma.
Hello, thank you. I was a question about structure. Have you set up a committee and have a constitution, or is there other ways of doing it?
Yeah, so you need a constitution for a CIO, obviously. So we're in the process of doing that. It's not, the government website has a complete template, and I think that the best advice is to just stick to exactly what that is, because if you deviate from it, there's a good chance they're going to come back and just ask you loads of questions, which will delay it even further. So if you type in example CIO constitution into Ecosia, it will bring up the government guidelines to it effectively, and you can just copy it off that. I think as far as the board goes, so and then there's, within setting up a CIO, there is a I think it's called association model and a foundation model. I think that's right. And the foundation model is basically pretty much the board makes decisions and they have very little accountability. So whereas the association model, every member gets a vote, and you can pretty much you make sure that the board is accountable to everyone else that's involved. So I think what we will do is set up on a to avoid getting some sort of hierarchy going, we'll probably set it up with a revolving board. So maybe we change those out every year or something, depending on what the minimum that we're allowed to do it is. And that way nobody is, sitting in a position of decision making or power for too long. And that way it is a genuine community thing. And also I'd add on that front about the lack of hierarchy is that I was intentionally, when I was approaching people, I was intentionally quite vague on how a lot of this would work, because I think it's really important that, because it is a community project, I think it's really important that all the groups involved have an equal say in how this is going to run, rather than just one person going in and going, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. I think it's really important for maximum buy-in that everybody gets involved with exactly how we set it up, and that no one group takes preference just because they were the ones that started rolling with it or what have you. So yeah, I mean, obviously that's down to everybody, but I think that's quite important. And then for organising, just while I'm on the hierarchy thing, I didn't ever realise this was a thing, but it is very, very true that containing a lot of knowledge into a few people, like siloing the knowledge in a few people, does lead to accidental hierarchy. So we're using Slack to organise, because it's not a chat, so it's not like a Telegram group where it's just crazy with links and chats. It's people actually organising all the time, but then everybody can see exactly what's going on in all the different threads in all the different working groups. So we've got about 8 different working groups going on this, but everybody can check in and see what's happening, so that, you know, if someone gets hit by a bus tomorrow, it's not, oh, well, what do we do now? Everyone can just go and look. Touch wood, no one gets hit by a bus, but everyone can go and figure out exactly what's been going on, and then hopefully it removes a bit of that hierarchical establishing through siloing of knowledge.
Thank you.
So, anyone else with any questions or comments here? Well, it's exceedingly impressive, Ben. And it sounds like Guildford Council are well behind you. Horsham District Council, I find very hard work, to be perfectly frank. I'm not sure whether there's any councillors here, but I did have a meeting with West Sussex County Council, the energy team and sustainability officer earlier in the week. And I have to say, before that meeting, I thought, that's not, the wheels are turning very slowly. But